Uh, Thank you, Cheryl, and thanks everyone for joining. I know it's just what you want, another Zoom session. It seems to be an infinite supply of those. And I hope in the not too distant future, we're able to meet again live because it's my favorite trip of the year. I want to start off with the big question, and the big question on everyone's mind. So next, Emily, this is what I know that if I were there, all of you would want to know. So to begin with, the big question. Next slide. Okay. So it's always good to start with humor or attempted humor. Let's go to the next slide, Emily. If the election were held today, who wins? I mean, that's obviously on everyone's mind. I want to run through with you things that some of it you will know, but most importantly on our time together today, I want to connect the dots on what it means, what we're likely to get into, races to watch, but at the end of the day, what's it all mean for how Congress functions, how the country functions, will the country heal? And I said this to Cheryl before we went live. There is a tailwind for Democrats that I have not seen, I think, in my professional lifetime. This is a big, big tailwind that they have, and that's on all their races, both House and Senate, as well as the presidency. So let's go to the next slide. I want to start, we always build up and hold suspense on the presidential race, House of Representatives. As many of you spend, days in and out of every week, probably talking to your congressional delegation, or maybe even other members from congressional members from around the country. Republicans will put a spin and they say, we're gonna win the House. We're gonna win the House. Here's how we're gonna do it. And Democrats feel pretty comfortable. Let me just start off at the beginning and say Democrats are gonna hold the House. They're likely to gain 4 or 5 seats. There's a chance that their margin could be even higher than that. So what you're seeing here is, this is beyond the margin of error. In terms of the generic ballot, 49-42. Let's go to the next slide. In terms of the Senate, in terms of what's going to happen in there, the odds are in Democrats' favor of capturing the Senate. And I'm going to break all this down in a couple of minutes. But as of right now, let me tell you, I think Democrats will capture the Senate. And I'll explain why when we get to some slides a little bit later. So far, House Democrats hold. Republicans do not come into a majority in the House. Pelosi is still Speaker. What happens to Kevin McCarthy, you'll have to stay listening to this Zoom session. And Democrats are favored to win the Senate, and I think beyond the 50-50 with a Biden presidency. Let's go to the next slide. In terms of the presidency, who wins? This is clearly Biden's to lose. All the trends, whether it's right direction, wrong direction, COVID-19, how Trump has handled that, satisfaction, dissatisfaction with personal lives, trade imbalance, foreign affairs, quality of life, with the possible exception of the economy, a couple other minor issues. All this favors Joe Biden. And unless he stumbles in a debate unexpectedly, it's possible, unless there's a senior moment somewhere on the campaign trail, and unless Kamala Harris has a bad night tomorrow night, Biden's going to win. And I think he's going to win fairly decisively. Let's go to the next slide. So what do voters care about? What's on their mind? Well, here's the next slide. Here's the If we had talked a week ago, it'd be the economy, healthcare. I could go down this list, and COVID-19 is at 62, and whereas the economy is 79. Economic inequality, climate change issues, I know are important up there. Bottom of the list, but we see these were their priorities. However, next slide. All this is out the window, and the president's testing positive last Friday has changed what people care about and what they're focusing on going forward. Let's go to the next slide. Biden supporters, healthcare, COVID-19 is now number 2. And inequality, economy, climate change. Trump supporters, these are their 5 top issues. And things in red, voters trust Trump and Republicans more than they trust Democrats. Those in blue are issues that voters trust Democrats to handle. And whether it's healthcare or particularly COVID-19, which is merging, and I think it's going to be the central issue between now and November 3rd, COVID-19, the Democrats have a clear advantage on that. Let's go to the next one. I've been watching this, and if there is any anti-incumbent feelings by voters, if there's going to be a wave of throw all the bums out. And let's go to the next slide. One of the things that I saw early that I thought, well, there's something in the water out there, is 8 House incumbents lost renomination in 2020. That's unusual. That's higher than average, number one. And it's particularly higher in a year that we're not dealing with redistricting. So you had 8, and I'm thinking, well, there's might be a trend out there. So if you look at, sort of throw the bums out, 2, dissatisfaction with Congress, lack of a HEROES Act 2.0, lack of a new COVID-19 response supplemental, and just the economy and people's feeling of hopelessness and helplessness and issues unaddressed. I was expecting that there would be more of an anti-incumbent wave. But the short answer is there is not as of right now. However, I do think that there is a chance for an anti-Republican incumbent small wave, a ripple, but clearly out there with with voters expressing their dissatisfaction, whether it's COVID-19, some of the other issues, inequality, that will present an opportunity for Democrats to pick up some seats that they might not have been in play. But so far, it has not emerged as the issue I thought it possibly could back in June. Let's go to the next. Before you go to Emily, I just want to point one thing out on this particular slide. If you look at Lipinski, Engel, Lacey Clay, those are progressives that won and beat, Lipinski was, I think, the only pro-life, well, one of 2 or 3 pro-life Democrats in the House. But Engel and Clare were clearly moderates and establishment Democrats. They were beaten by progressives and people that are a little bit further to the left than the mainstream Democratic Party. Let's go to the next slide. So if you listen to Republicans, they'll tell you McCarthy's going to be speaker, and they're all saying we're going to be chairman of this committee or that committee. So how do they capture the House? Is it realistic? Let's go to the next slide. Just to refresh your memory, Democrats hold 232 seats, 218 is the majority, of course. Republicans hold 198. Libertarians currently have 1. There are 4 vacancies. Let's go to the next one. As of right now, Democrats are guaranteed 224 as of right now. Republicans have 188. And one of the sad things on our democracy and the state of politics today, although I'm a sort of a centrist Democrat or moderate Democrat, is that there's not more truly contentious races, truly competitive congressional battles. There's only 23 true toss-up states out there, districts in play this fall. So Democrats now 224. So majority, I think, is secured. That will grow. Republicans 188, and that possibly could go down. Let's go to the next one. So for Republicans to win, just so they need to keep 152 of all 152 safe seats. They need to pick up all 19 likely Republican seats, all 17 leaning Republican seats, all 23 of the toss-up races, and 7 of the 38 lean or likely Democratic seats. They need an absolute sweep on this that is impossible. So Republicans are, I think, fairly sure of staying in the minority. And what you may see is Republicans heading to the exit by 2022. A lot of people not wanting to be in the minority for what could be a considerable period of time, heading to the exits. Let's go to the next slide. So how do Democrats retain control of the House? The path is pretty easy. Let's go to the next slide. Keep all 186 safe Democratic seats, all 28 likely Democratic seats, and of the lean Democrats, just pick up 4 out of 10. That likely scenario makes Pelosi Speaker, Steny Hoyer and Jim Clyburn as number 2 and 2.5 in the House. So their path forward is very, very predictable. Let's go to the next slide. Fight for the House, just to show you what, and you probably all want to memorize this, but I'll go through it very quickly. Let's go to the next slide. These are who the Republicans are worried about. Their members that they're worried about, and you have one in that's always going to have a competitive race, Jamie Herrera Butler, but you have the rest of these are members that they're really worried about. And they're investing a lot of money. It's what they call their Patriot program. So that is the most vulnerable Republicans as identified by Republicans. And there's one in particular, 2 or 3 of these members are just terrific members. Fred Upton of Michigan, Rodney Davis of Illinois, Brian Fitzpatrick of Pennsylvania. These are good members, always going to have tough races. And in a Democratic landslide, some of the moderate Republicans could be swept aside as well. Let's go to the next one. These are Democrats that that the Democratic Campaign Committee is investing in, that they think are races that they're concerned about, races that Republicans have targeted, that they're concerned about. But on the toss-up side, a lot of these were elected in 2018. But this shows you Democrats have a lot of seats that they're on the defensive about. But that said, still feeling very, very good about the majority of those members winning. Hampshire, Washington, somebody I've gotten to know very well. I'm going to talk about a little bit, your delegation a little bit at the end of this. She's going to have tough races. It's going to be competitive for a while. But right now, people are feeling pretty good about that race. Go to the next one. Democrats, they have a program called Red to Blue. Red states, Republicans held seats that they're working on. Only 2 in there, I think, watch. And Wendy Davis in Texas, keep an eye on that race. If she wins, and she wins in a fairly significant way, meaning margin, Democrats are going to have a very good night on their House races. Their numbers are likely to exceed their current levels. Let's go to the next slide. Republicans, these are seats that they're targeting that aren't necessarily a Democratic priority. So they're not on any Democratic list, but this is who they're going after. Some of these, like Sherry Bustos or Colin Peterson, are senior Democrats and part of leadership and part of sort of the establishment Democrats. A lot of these, particularly Peterson, they go after him every cycle, but that's who they're going after. And none of these are toss-up states, toss-up races. Every one of these is lean or likely Democrat right now. Okay, next slide. So the 5 open seats, I think there's only one that might flip on those, but you've got these are the Georgia 7 might change. The toss-up seats that we're looking at, and on open seats, Republicans are going to win some of these open seats. Let's go to the next one. Continued, and one is this is the true toss-up, the New York 2. These are again seats that are open, will be somewhat contentious, and most of those are Republican held, likely to remain Republican. Let's go to the next one. Here's some more open seats that we can look at. And these are changing all the time. I'll just give you one example. Cameron Webb in Virginia, it's Charlottesville. It's lean Republican, but I've seen some polls in the last 24 hours. He's actually closed the gap. It's now dead even in that race. So this is the competitive races out there in open seats. Let's go to the next one. So takeaway from the House, Democrats are going to hold the majority, and with a wave that is very, very possible. Hasn't peaked yet, but with a wave, they're going to add to their margin. Let's go to the Senate. Yeah, Republicans are at 53, Democrats 45, and you got 2 independents. So it's 53-47. That's Angus King and Bernie Sanders. So it's 53-47. That's the battleground. And Republicans, 23 seats are up this year. Republican-held seats. So they start with 30 secured seats. Democrats have, the 47 I talked about, and they only have 2 races that I'm going to focus on. So on the seats open in, on the races in 2020 in the Senate, right now 13 of those 35 seats are Democrats. 18 are, if we had to pick today, 18 are leaning Republican. But now it gets complicated and gets interesting. I want to pick a couple of sort of sleeper races for you that maybe 1 or 2 people didn't see coming to keep an eye on. So let's go through the true toss-ups. And as I do this, I want to also keep a tally of 50-50, 51-49, Democrats or Republicans, what their margin is. So Democrats to win the Senate need to win 16 of the 35 races or 15 of the 35 races in the presidency, assuming Biden wins. So they need to win all 7 safe Democratic seats, all 3 likely Democratic seats, all 3 lean Democratic seats, 3 of the 4 toss-up races, or 2 of the 4 toss-up races in the presidency. That gets Chuck Schumer Senate Majority Leader. The next one. So how do the Republicans retain control of the Senate? They need to win 21 of the 35 races, or 20, and Trump wins re-election. So they need all 9 safe Republican seats, all 4 likely, all 5 lean Republican, and 3 or 4 of the toss-up races, or 2 of the 4 if Trump wins re-election. So the Republican path for the majority is actually complicated. I know the prevailing wisdom is Republicans win, but there was Mitch McConnell at the end of July made a brief statement. The press didn't focus on it very much, but to me it was telling. And at the end of July, McConnell told his Republican colleagues who are running in 2020, if you have to distance yourself from Trump, do it. Save yourself. The last time, it was a pretty strong statement. I was expecting that in September. I really was. The last time I saw it, a Republican statement like that, leadership distancing themselves, was in '96, in which Republicans basically said to Republican Senate candidates, Republican leadership, if you have to run against Bob Dole, the Republican candidate for president, do it. Save yourself. So McConnell came out the end of July, which tells me, and he's a terrific vote counter, and his number one priority in life is maintaining Republican control of the Senate. That tells you that one of the best vote counters and politicians in America is worried about Republican chances this fall. Let's go to the next slide. So this just puts in play what red states are out there, what blue states in terms of are they safe, likely, lean Republican. I'm going to talk about a couple of those races now. But Republicans, let's go through the true toss-ups. This one emerged late, and that's Iowa. And Joni Ernst is the incumbent Republican and doesn't have a very good track record, and she's all in on Trump. All in on Trump. And the question is she going to pay a price on that? Greenfield's run a good campaign. So I think Greenfield's got a pretty good shot to pick up that seat. Montana, Steve Bullock, you remember him, he former governor, ran for president, ran against Steve Daines. Close race, Bullock's a good vote getter. So watch that one. Maine, Gideon versus Collins. Susan Collins, I think it's the last, she was probably the last senator that wanted to see a push to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the Supreme Court before the election. And so she's a moderate Republican, tries to straddle a lot of issues on both sides. It may catch up to her this time. And in North Carolina, Cunningham's got a good lead. Tillis is vulnerable, but Cunningham ran into some little bit of a scandal over the weekend with a lady in California. So this race I think will tighten in North Carolina. But Cunningham's a good candidate with the exception of some moral problems that just surfaced recently. Let's go to the next one. I think Doug Jones loses. This is the Jeff Sessions seat. And I got to tell you, Doug Jones, Democrat, is a terrific senator. I've watched him, I've gotten to know him. He is a terrific senator, whether you're a Republican or Democrat. I like this guy a lot. He's running against a former Alabama football coach. I think Jones goes down. That's the one, that's the biggest concern among Democrats they have on that race. But I think privately, they're conceding that they're going to lose that. So that now puts them possibly down to 46 from the current lineup, if you don't count that first chart that I looked at. South Carolina, Lindsey Graham, Jamie Harrison, the 48-48. South Carolina, though, South Carolina. And I never want to pronounce Lindsey Graham defeated. He's got the race of a lifetime down there. Got a lot of money, but again, he's got some issues coming up that I think are potentially going to motivate the opposition base, perhaps Supreme Court, and I think the president's response on COVID-19. Kentucky, you'll hear a lot all the time about Amy McGrath can beat Mitch McConnell. I would never bet against Mitch McConnell. And, you know, it used to be that an opposition party would never take on the other party's leader, the majority or minority leader. All that changed in 2004 when Republicans went after Tom Daschle, this Democratic leader, South Dakota, and beat him by about 5,000 votes. So now it's tit for tat all the time. You hear a lot on McConnell's in trouble. He's got about 13 or 14 million dollars. This is Kentucky. He's a shrewd politician. I see that a little bit beyond the Democrats' grasp right now. Let's go to the next one. Georgia, watch Georgia. You got two races down there, and both are close. 49-48, Purdue's the incumbent, and then Kelly Loeffler was appointed to Isaacson's, Johnny Isaacson's seat. She's in trouble. Democrats, this is a likely runoff. Democrats have a chance of winning, a pretty good chance of winning one of these two seats in Georgia. Next one. And races that I think Republican support for Donald Trump is going to cost him dearly. Martha McSally, who I knew in the House, this is the John McCain seat in the House, moderate Republican, all in on Trump. Mark Kelly is Gabby Gifford's husband, former astronaut. He's got a comfortable lead. Arizona's changing. I think Kelly wins that. So Republicans lose that seat. Cory Gardner, again, the incumbent Republican, all in on Trump. Hickenlooper, former governor, ran for president, didn't do well, but former governor right now. All the win is at Hickenlooper's back. And the other Democrat, incumbent Democrat that Democrats are worried about is Gary Peters in Michigan. He's got a strong challenger, but I would rate it as slight favorite for incumbent Gary Peters. Next one. Okay, I want to put two on your radar screen and then deny that I ever said this, and that I was never on a Zoom session with Washington. Something's going on in Alaska. You don't see much about it, but something's going on up there. It's both in their House race and their Senate race. It's Al Gross is running on environment, climate change issues, running a campaign that's totally off the radar screen. I think he's running as an independent, but he'll caucus with the Democrats. Keep an eye on Alaska. Something's going on. The other one that is now on the Democrats' radar screen in Washington is Kansas. And Roger Marshall, Barbara Bollier. Kansas has not had a Democratic senator in close to 100 years. Democrats feel that they got a shot to pick up that. I think it's a little more of a stretch, but those are two sleeper races that you could, if I'm right, you could say, hey, Bradley mentioned that. If I'm wrong, forget that I said it. But a couple that I'm happen to be watching. Let's go to the next one. So, presidential election, states to watch, and what's going on. Let's go to the next slide. If you look at just, take a hard look at 2016 versus 2020, it is absolutely incredible how Biden is ahead, sometimes comfortably ahead, in states that Trump carried in 16. And the map is, it is flashing a strong blue right now, presidential wise. And even a couple of states that like Iowa that has Trump ahead, things are going on. Things are happening out there that I think this race is going to tighten even more. Georgia is in play, clearly in play. And if I had to pick out a few of these, are must-haves for Trump. Florida is obviously one. Michigan is one. Minnesota's reason he's been up there a few times. North Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania. Biden's got a comfortable lead in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. The map does not, and the current polling is not favorable to a Trump re-election. Next slide. So if you, election night, just watch some of the states that could tip the election one way or the other. A couple big ones: Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, big. Florida, Michigan. Those are the big ones. And the blue is obviously Democrats, and the pink or light red is for Republicans. But all the action, all the possibilities of getting that 270 electoral votes is on the Democratic side. Opportunities that they have. Let's go to the next slide. So how does Trump win? I almost wanted to put in a slide that said he doesn't. It is hard to see how Trump wins a fair election, and I'll explain what I mean by that. But here's basically what he has to do in the next 4 weeks. Go to the next slide. He's got to win Ohio. Biden's ahead in Ohio. The polling after the debate, his performance in Ohio showed undecided voters really disappointed in Trump's performance, Trump's showing, and Trump's grasp of issues. He's got to win Michigan. So if he loses Michigan, Minnesota, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, he has to win all these. He has to win every one of these states, and so many of them are toss-ups right now. The Ohio's, the Floridas, and a number of those are leaning beyond the margin of error for Biden. So this guy has to absolutely clear the field, and in terms of winning the White House. Let's go to the next one. How's Biden win? The paths to Biden winning the White House are, to me, as numerous as the path to Democrats capturing control of the Senate. They start with a strong Democratic base. You add in the states that are leaning Democrats, and if you look at the true toss-ups, if Biden wins the toss-ups, he wins an absolute overwhelming electoral mandate. Go to the next slide. So you look at this. How enthusiastic are candidates for president? And we saw in 2018 Kavanaugh, that nomination motivated the Republican base, motivated the Democratic base very much. So I'm looking and following voter enthusiasm, and what's out there, and what issues are sort of pushing the voters. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, potential outcome. Let's go to the next one. If I had, these are obviously all the likely outcomes, but I would tell you what I think the likely outcome is. Biden wins huge in terms of electoral votes. Biden wins the popular vote. Trump, as of right now, I don't expect Trump to carry a state that Clinton won. I do expect Biden to carry a number of states that Trump won. So if you're Joe Biden, you've got to avoid mistakes, and the election's looking very, very, very good. And what we're also seeing is that there is Biden coattails that will affect voter turnout and will affect enthusiasm to help Democrats down ballot. Let's go to the next one. So how many undecided voters out there? That's what it's going to boil down to. Who's undecided? Let's go to the next one. It's actually 11%. I don't know anybody that's undecided. I don't know how anybody could be undecided. But they're saying 11%. This is obviously going to narrow. And I would expect that the majority of these, they're undecided now, will probably break, the majority, not the super majority, but the majority will break Biden's way. Let's go to the next one. So there's issues out there that you wonder if they matter, if it made a difference to the voters. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the debate, and what happened last Friday and Saturday on COVID-19. Number one, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Republicans have used the Supreme Court vacancy, I think, well. I give them credit. It is motivating their base. And clearly they're gearing up for a fight. McConnell sees it, Lindsey Graham sees it, and they're going to push. And I think unless 2 or 3 more senators test positive for COVID-19, I think they're going to try to move this nomination, confirm this nomination before the election. So Republicans are using this to rally their base. Democrats, I think their messaging is weak. I don't think the fact that Roe v. Wade, the Affordable Care Act, so many other things, voting rights, so many other things are actually on the ballot. You're not hearing it a lot in some of these competitive races. So that has had an impact, but I think more on motivating Republican side than Democratic side. The debate. Clearly, Trump needed a reset. He needed that to say that he's in command of issues and is presidential. He didn't pass that test. And the early polling after the debate, only in 2 states, but the early polling showed over a 2-to-1 margin of voters thinking that Biden bested him and that Trump's performance was very disappointing, 2-to-1 majority. And so the debate did have a positive impact, I think, for Biden, negative impact for Trump. Can Trump turn this around in the next debate? That's a stretch, hard to say. COVID-19, President Trump testing positive. What's it mean? I watched this as you did. First of all, you pray for his safety, but what impact is that having on the elections? So far, the majority of voters are feeling that he is not led, he's not been appropriate, he has not taken necessary precautions or provided the absolute necessary leadership on COVID-19. So there is not a positive, let's all rally and try to win this for Donald Trump while he's recovering. I thought that was possible. We saw a candidate in Staten Island, or a big Trump rally, no mask, no social distancing on Saturday night. But generally speaking, voters are now more tuned into COVID-19, more tuned into disappointed in how the president has handled this. Let's go to the next slide. So how many folks have already voted? It's a lot. And mail-in ballots are the key to this election. And we're going to talk about that in a second. So we're going to have record numbers of mail-in ballot on these states and a lot of these. And of course, some of the mail-in ballots will not be counted until Election Day or afterwards. So this is going to be a complicated election, which I'm going to talk to, but a record number. And it's likely to continue for quite a while, the vote counting. So next slide. Well, we know that results election night. Next slide, Emily. Now, Republicans who still think they can win the House majority and Republicans who still think Trump is going to pull this out think that there will be a clear winner on election night, and privately they might think differently, but publicly they're saying that, and conversations I have with members, they're sticking to the party script. I don't know how we know the results on a number of Senate races, perhaps a number of House races, as well as the presidency. There are over 240 lawsuits filed already on mail-in ballots. The Republican National Committee is involved with nearly 40 of them. So questioning and really going after the legality of mail-in ballots is going to slow up the process, going to alter the process of counting, and I think it's going to lengthen the process dramatically. So I do not expect, on November 4th or even 5th, we're going to know. We might not know who controls the Senate, and although the results of the presidential election are going to be clear on November 3rd, meaning 320, 330 electoral votes, a majority of the popular vote, all the challenges have yet to play out, and that's going to take some time. Let's go to the next slide. So counting the votes and questioning the votes, those are two things to look at. Democrats they've grown fairly resigned to the fact that it is going to be a contentious and lengthy election, and they expect it. Let's go to the next slide. So one of the ways around is Joe Biden wins by a large margin that cannot be questioned. And I think that's possible, but an overwhelming margin could avoid part of this. Let's go. When Nancy Pelosi said this a year ago, she worried about Trump giving up the White House. And I thought, man, that's a crazy comment. And unfortunately, I happened to tell her in a conversation, I thought it was a little bit over the top. Never do that with Nancy Pelosi, believe me. It is now accepted by Democrats that it will not be a peaceful transition. Republicans expect it. You're hearing a lot of McConnell and lots of people saying it will be a smooth transition. Democrats don't think it will be. To a person, I've not found anyone who's saying, yeah, we expect it to be a smooth transition. Let's go to the next one. Some of the these are Liz Cheney and McConnell. They put out their markers saying it better be, and it will be, but remains to be seen. Let's go to the next one. Questions you may be on your mind. Will there be another COVID-19 stimulus package? If Democrats felt they needed their moderate House members who are a little bit worried if the sentiment changes back home, and if McConnell feels it's the only way to help save the Senate, they'll get a deal before the election. Senate's out until October 19th. House is out and subject to the call of the Speaker. So it's a long shot that it'll be before the election. Only those two factors would change it. However, there will be another COVID-19, what we call a Heroes 2.0. Will it be in a lame duck? Probably not. Will there be one if Biden wins the presidency? There will be a robust one. If there's one in a lame duck, it'll be under $2 trillion, maybe 1.8. If there's one in a new Congress, 117th Congress, a new Congress, it will be $3 trillion plus. It will be robust. Next slide. If Trump loses the presidency and Democrats capture the Senate, I think we're in for a very chaotic November, December lame duck session. I don't know how we get through a continuing resolution without some games by the White House. And I think a lot of other things don't get done. I think they wind it up and say, well, we'll see you next year. But a continuing resolution, which only runs currently until December 11th, how we get another one in place is going to be awkward, and I think there'll be threats of a shutdown. Second, Democrats, if they do capture the Senate and if they capture the White House, that first 100 days, they want to duplicate FDR. They want a New Deal, and they're going to be big and bold and just roaring to go come to January 3rd, particularly January 20th. 3rd is the new Congress, January 20th, obviously, is the presidency. But they're going to be big and bold, lots of new initiatives. And everything you're seeing, policy statement-wise, what you're seeing in their 2021 appropriation bills in the House, which didn't go anywhere, they passed the House but weren't considered in the Senate, are markers for a Biden presidency. And one thing we do know on the new Congress and a Biden presidency is the credit card's going to be out. It's not going to be put away in the wallet. They're going to use it, and they're going to spend a lot of money, and they're going to put a lot of things in place.
Hi, David. We are at the closing time period. I did send you some questions. Good, but you go ahead and finish up.
15 more seconds. Next slide. So parties, watch if McCarthy loses. If they lose, watch what happens with McCarthy on House leadership. Schumer's okay. I think McConnell will be okay, but Republicans are going to have to deal with life after Trump because they've all bought in. And Democrats, Pelosi, they're going to have to deal life with progressives. Much more difficult. Next slide. Will our democracy survive? Yes, but it's going to get ugly in the next couple of months. But we will survive, and things can get somewhat back to normal, I hope, January and February of next year. Okay.
David, thank you so much. What I'm hearing from everybody is it's always a highlight, and we always enjoy this session. So I have let people know that if they have specific questions, they can reach out to you. Otherwise, once again, thank you on behalf of all of us at Housing Washington for joining us.
Okay.
And this ends the session.
Okay, let me show you the last slide, and then we'll go.
Okay, last session, last one. Let's see if we can be optimistic about the Mariners.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, David.